Hello, YouTube. Aksai Catacombs, a mysterious and mystical place, is located in the suburb of Rostov in the town of Aksai. This town of Axai stands on a network of caves, many of which are thousands of years old. The tunnels stretch for many kilometers, and their total length is more than 100 kilometers. And this is only a known part of them. The catacombs are clearly of artificial origin, and the time of their construction has not yet been established. Most likely they are more than 1,000 years old. And it's also been established who actually created the system of underground passages. Well, that's at least according to several sources. And occasionally, even in Russian television, there were stories about anomalies that occur in the catacombs of Aksai. However, the truth about this structure is much more ordinary according to scientists and the government. So let's do this. Let's first look at what the debunkers tell us, and then let's look at the paranormal aspects of the story. The catacombs were not built by a mythical ancient people, nor by the inhabitants of the underworld, or even by the ancient Scythians. This small underground city was built in 1957 as a reserve command post of the North Caucasus military district. It is not surprising that few people know about it because the construction of such facilities was never advertised, and even the locals know a little bit about these places because the construction was carried out quietly and mostly went on during the night hours. Perhaps there were some catacombs on the site of the built city in the past, but it is impossible to find their trace now. The command post is built according to all the canons of the threat of nuclear war. Autonomously, people can stay in it for many years, and the bunker itself is able to withstand a direct hit by a nuclear bomb. Even the ventilation system is designed so that the rooms do not need to be heated. The underground passages were built in such a way that due to the operation of equipment and heat from people, they maintained a constant temperature of 17 to 20 degrees Celsius. The construction of the facility was completed in the late 1960s, and up to 1,000 people could work at the facility at the same time. However, with the collapse of the Soviet Union, no one needed the underground bunker, and its work, or the work to construct it and maintain it, was suspended in 1993. Since then, the facility has fallen into complete disrepair and began to overgrow with various myths and legends. Most of the passages have collapsed from underground explosions, and at the moment there are only small passages that are of interest to diggers. I explain who the diggers, or diggeri in Russian, are, what they hunt for, and so forth. You can find it in my videos. It's a very interesting subculture in modern Russia. Perhaps the explosions were arranged specifically to cover up all traces, because the real purpose of this entity has not yet been declassified. So nobody knows for sure what it was being built for. Also, some of the passages were filled with concrete, and it is impossible to get into them. At the moment, the catacombs are a paradise for the diggeri, those who look for treasures, valuable objects, and so on. And fans of such objects, and you can safely visit the site and go inside as far as your preparation and desire allows you. A small museum of military equipment of the Soviet period has grown up, so to say, around the underground base, thanks to the efforts of enthusiasts. But where you can see, inside the museum, you can see some of the very interesting pieces of equipment and more. The command for the construction of the camouflage command post in 1957 was given by Pliev, who was the then commander of the North Caucasus military district. It was the first underground headquarters of the district in the USSR, and Colonels Andreev and Lagerev began work on the site. In general, the construction was supervised from the Nakhabinsk Institute of the Military Engineering Academy in the Soviet Union. According to local residents, no one noticed the construction of the underground structures, although the nearest housing is only 500 meters from the camouflage command post. What could they have noticed? Well, there was not much noise. About 150 to 200 people took part in the construction, mostly underwater builders. There was no experience for such work. Even the tunneling combine machine was difficult to get there. The work was carried out at night. The construction site was covered with camouflage netting. The anti-aircraft artillery stood on the hill opposite it, just in case, just in case they were needed to prevent the enemy from observing this construction site or doing damage to it. First, the land was exported, premises were built, and then the soil was imported again, 7 meters of black earth and 1 meter of clay. There was steel armor under the clay. Reinforced concrete followed. The thickness of the reinforced concrete stiffeners was 1 meter 20 centimeters. In fact, a subway was being built in the Don steps, so to say. That's the area around Aksai. Tunnels 8 meters high went 85 meters deep into the hill. Such a design, according to the authors of the project, was supposed to withstand even a direct hit by a nuclear bomb. Of course, all this was exaggerated, according to the people who accept this hypothesis, so to say. The first stage of the underground city was built in 10 years. However, by the end of the 1960s, there were still no well-maintained premises here, only dungeons, but not equipped, and bomb shelters. However, still, exercises were held there. There was no water or heating. There was also no final design for the underground structures. Wood-paneled walls, parquet, expensive furniture, and well-appointed offices appeared later, by the end of the 1970s. According to Vladimir Glachenko, director of the Museum of the History of the town of Aksai, about 1,000 people could live in the underground city without communication with the outside world. They could actually last there for about 3 years. To official science, this is all pure fiction. The camouflage command post could accommodate a maximum of about 500 people and be offline no more than a few months. There was a sewer system, a diesel power plant, and special filters purified spring water. In a 5-meter-high hall, one of the first computers in the Rostov region was installed. It was a huge machine and just under the ceiling, and it used lamps. Curiously, the building was not specially heated. All rooms were connected by a looped heating duct. The people themselves and the working equipment had to heat the dungeon. The temperature here was constantly 18 to 19 degrees Celsius, according to this source. So according to the data, there was also a swimming pool in the underground headquarters of the North Caucasus Military District, and an underground passage led to the bank of the Aksai River. It was assumed that the authorities would be able to go to the river, take a swim, sunbath, and return to the headquarters. In general, they did not spare money. By the end of the 1970s, the underground city was completely built. It is estimated that its area is at least 3,500 square meters. It is not possible to name exact numbers. Despite numerous requests from the museum workers, it was not possible to get the plans of the dungeons. The North Caucasus Military District headquarters assured them that they're lost. So you can see you're getting different numbers, different aspects, different descriptions. So what was that? However, the reserve command post was not the only underground structure built in the Mukhina Balka, that's the name of the area. There were also several secret laboratories located here, which were managed directly from Moscow. Mere mortals were strictly forbidden to enter. The residents of Aksai guessed in the early 1980s about the fact that they had some kind of dangerous neighbor. Although outwardly Mukhina Balka looked decent, greenery plus several small houses of unknown purpose. It rumbled day and night underground. Private houses collapsed, and finally the newly built school number 3 developed huge cracks. It seemed that the city was being bombed continuously. Tremors were felt even in Rostov, and many people thought underground equipment was tested for the effects of one of the damaging factors of a nuclear explosion, a shock wave. Military equipment rolled into underground niche. The equivalent of a nuclear bomb was charged, a mixture of gunpowder and TNT nitrate, and all this exploded. But there's also no confirmation of all this, and again, all this data are exaggerated by the narrators themselves, and the only thing that remains in place is a filling in one of the tunnels. According to many, it was in these holes that the gunpowder was laid to test the effect of an explosive wave on equipment. According to another hypothesis, these are just holes for the cable. There is an opinion that a seismological laboratory operated in Mukhina Balka. It conducted research on how to cause an artificial earthquake. There were more fantastic hypotheses of what was happening. It was said that the military was conducting experiments to teleport tanks from Aksai to Moscow, and indeed the equipment was disappearing somewhere. It went into the site, so to say, but never came back, never came out. Anyway, Aksai was saved from complete destruction, and in the mid-1980s, dangerous experiments stopped. And soon the entire secret city ceased to exist. It was destroyed by underground explosions. Only 8 to 10 meters long passages remain from the branched system. The rest crumbled. Nevertheless, some of the structures were less damaged. The camouflage command post finally ceased to exist in 1993. Within the framework of the disarmament treaty, it is said that then the USSR defense minister at the time, Pavel Grachev, himself came to close down the underground headquarters. Abandoned dungeons burned repeatedly. Who burned them, the military or local residents, cannot be determined at this point. Aksai residents took everything from the site that they could carry with them into their homes: furniture, parquet, plumbing, and power cables. Smoked sausage from the food warehouse storage was considered the best snack by local drunks. The sausage was packed in airtight bags and had to remain edible for at least 3 years. 25 years of work by hundreds of people and billions of rubles have simply gone into the sand. It is not difficult to get to this place. Aksai is a close suburb of Rostov, and you could get to that town by bus in 30 to 40 minutes from the fabulous city of Rostov. However, if you believe in everything mystical, and also all sorts of anomalies, then it would be better to stay at home. There's plenty of that to keep you away. This is a unique system of underground passages. The first local catacombs dug out or created for religious purposes by the inhabitants of the ancient Kobyak settlement at the beginning of our era. Subsequent generations diligently entangled in a network of new labyrinths. As a result, A real underground city filled with all sorts of anomalies has spread out under modern town of Aksai and its surroundings. So let's begin with the ghost woman legends. One day he was looking and light was coming out of the basement window of the Fortress Museum. That's the museum I told you about that was created in the area. He was completely at a loss. He remembered a few minutes ago he turned off the electricity in the basement with his own hands. He unlocked the basement door, looked down. That's how Vyacheslav Zaporozhtsov began his story. The cat who followed him raised its fur and shied away from the basement with a wild howl or shriek. But the museum employee did not pay much attention to the strange behavior of his animal. He was more interested in something else. Despite the click of the switch, the light did not go on. Then the man carefully descended into the gloomy dungeons of the customs outpost area. The woman who wandered through the bypass gallery simply could not be there, except Vyacheslav Zaporozhtsov. Except for him, no one stayed in the fortress for the night. Nevertheless, the strange person silently glided past, almost hitting the dumbfounded museum employee. Her loose black hair hid her face, but Vyacheslav Zaporozhtsov saw her clothing perfectly, a white dress with a wide hem and an elegant corset. It was not difficult for the professional historian to recognize the outfit in which the fashionistas of the middle of the 19th century sported. Zaporozhtsov slowly backed away, and the woman entered the wall and disappeared. When the museum employee jumped out of the basement, the light went out on its own. This is not the first appearance of the ghost, Vyacheslav Zaporozhtsov recalled. The woman in white has been seen there before. He ran into her himself a few years ago in the same gallery. In addition, mysterious knocks are often heard from under the walls of the museum. No other way. Someone's probably was murdered in that spot, was an innocent victim, and the restless soul has settled into the dungeons. However, according to the Axai Catacombs, a ghost could easily have wandered into the cellars of the customs outpost from the other end of the town. There is an infamous manhole opening directly into the river Don. According to legend, many victims were sent on their last journey through this hole by the local murderer Yefim Kolupayev, who would invite rich travelers to his quarters in the 1860s. And he also kept the money of his victims somewhere hidden locally under the ground. According to another hypothesis, the ghost of the fortress is associated with an elusive gang that robbed passing merchants a couple of decades later, in that 19th century. They say that the lichadei, or evildoers in Russian, hid their mutual loot or treasures in the dungeons of Aksai and entrusted the daughter of the chieftain to protect the treasure. And she still may be fulfilling her mission properly even after death. Rostov historian Nikolai Karpov, in his book Dawn Treasure Hunters, said that an ancient old woman came to the Aksai District Communist Party Committee in the 1950s and admitted that her grandfather was a cook in that famous gang, and he gave her the secret of the treasure. The old woman was ready to share it with the authorities on the condition that she would be placed in the privileged communist home for the elderly. At first, the grandmother was considered crazy, and when they finally realized what is what, she was gone. Look, she was of advanced age after all. Another legend tells this. The rich owner of a local winery, when going abroad, mentioned that he hid jewelry in one of the wine barrels left in the dungeons, which upon his return would ensure a comfortable existence for himself, his children, and grandchildren. Moreover, this treasure is allegedly also guarded by a ghost woman. The winemaker never returned to Russia, but his secret cellar was recently found. 4 oak barrels are still stored there, almost as tall as a man. Each is filled with wine from the year 1900 harvest. However, the owner of the farmstead on whose territory such treasure was discovered does not allow them to be opened. The military was also closely interested in Aksai labyrinths, hidden from prying eyes. For example, in the area of Mukhina Balka, which is located near the customs outpost, a fortified checkpoint and a bunker for Communist Party leaders, built in case of an atomic war, were hidden underground. Secret tests of powder simulators of nuclear explosions were conducted there until recently. And we already told you more details, but still. According to eyewitnesses, such experiments were accompanied by a deafening roar and a 200-meter column of flame. At the same time, whole sheds and houses fell underground in the nearby courtyards of the town. One day, an uncontrollable blast wave tore the hoods and roofs of cars of the generals who came to observe the tests, and threw the cars themselves 15 meters to the side, pushed them to the side. Sometimes burned through from the frontal armor to the stern. Heavy armored vehicles were taken out of the testing ground. But that was already the result of testing new artillery shells. A tank or self-propelled gun would be driven in the long underground passage. A heavy armored door was closed behind it, and then the vehicles were shot at from a special cannon. Often, a super projectile hitting a target brought down a massive door at the same time. Even more incredible rumors are circulating about military equipment that has not returned from the under the ground at all. It is said that a top-secret laboratory located on the lower tiers conducted experiments in teleportation of tanks from Aksai to the Moscow region. However, there is another explanation. The armored vehicles were lost underground by themselves without the participation of people. This is more believable considering that the technology pertaining to teleportation has obviously not been demonstrated in Soviet military escapades in Afghanistan, Southwest Africa, or the Middle East. Actually, initially, the military planned to use not the Mukhina Balka site for their needs, but to use the ancient catacombs of the Kobякov settlement. But a terrible tragedy forced them to abandon this idea. It all started with the disappearance of a soldier who went to examine an unknown passage. Well, the search team sent after him also suffered losses. This time, 2 more Soviet military personnel disappeared. Later, those vanished soldiers were found after all, or rather, what's left of them were the lower parts of their bodies. Both were cut at chest level by something unusually sharp. It was cut flawlessly, as if with a giant, sharp razor. The soldiers' handheld transceivers also fell under that mysterious knife or razor blade, whatever. When they were disassembled, not a single crack or dent was found in the microchips. The cut turned out to be very neat. Further searches were stopped. Information about the death of soldiers was classified so not as to raise panic, and the sappers, blowing up a 100-meter section, sealed up the dangerous passage. Soon, however, another mysterious death occurred in the dungeons. Oleg Burlakov, a local amateur researcher of catacombs, was also found cut in half. This time, however, they found both the lower and upper parts. For some reason, only the bones remained from the upper part. Recently, visiting diggers or diggery tried to walk through the Aksai catacombs with a dog. At one of the turns, the dog suddenly whined and rushed back in panic. The diggery backed up behind the dog. An incredible sight was in front of their eyes. The walls of the passage in the place where people had just been standing began to converge quickly, and then they went back. Another time, the diggery barely managed to bounce off the sinking floor. The collapsed passage immediately assumed its original position. All this suggests ancient traps. But who were they supposed to cut, chop, and crush? It is possible that they were installed to prevent something or someone from getting out from the depths to the surface. It is possible that the mysterious Aksai Nessie crawls out from under the ground. But actually from the water. As geological exploration has shown, there is an underground lake at a depth of about 40 meters under Axai, and the sea is splashing at a depth of 250 meters. Another river also flows under the Don riverbed, on the shore of which the town is located. It is no coincidence that cars and trailers that fell several times from the old Axai bridge disappeared without a trace. Instead of missing transport, the divers found a bottomless funnel in the Don riverbed where the water drags its prey with monstrous force. The divers that went there were saved from death only by a steel safety rope. You see, there are legends, ancient legends of a dragon that was worshipped by local people and that allegedly lived in the area. So people believe that may still be down there some kind of reptile-like creature, a cryptid. There's another mystery in Aksai. It is known that according to the hypothesis expressed by some ufologists, UFOs are actually unidentified underground objects that soar into the sky only for a short time. Geophysicists also agree with this. For example, Andrei Alkhavatov, a scientific expert who used to be, I'm not sure if he's active in still, but from the Association Ecology of the Unknown in the Russian Federation, believed that UFOs may represent ball lightning generated by tectonic processes. I also urge my audience to look at my videos about UFOs and earthquakes. The Axai phenomenon confirms his hypothesis. Flying saucers are a common phenomenon at that site. According to eyewitnesses, they suddenly appear as if from under the ground and return there. Once, for example, something like a pontoon with a transparent dome slowly floated over the city, and in that object, humanoid figures or shapes were swarming. Another object blinded the night Aksai with an unusually bright stream of light. When the base of warships on the Don coast came under this ray, there was a terrible panic. Heavy machine guns even opened fire on the flying saucer. However, it was to no avail. I would like to get more information regarding this before considering this story's veracity. But there was another reported case. 3 spherical UFOs were spinning wildly around the old Aksai bridge. The illumination turned out to be such that the traffic on the highway stalled. Drivers, not wanting to go any further, watched the free performance with their mouths open, and desperate traffic cops had to call for help from the town authorities. Meanwhile, the hypothesis of tectonic activity put forward by Andrei Arkhavatov makes it possible to explain some other Aksai glitches. First of all, of course, there are those dancing walls of the catacombs. Well, they may be the result of local underground earthquakes. And in this case, the roar of the underground dragon, so to say, will turn out to be the underground rumble of magma, which is quite common for tectonically active areas, striving to break free. And it is still unknown what is scarier, the semi-mythical secret life of ghosts, or real earthquake, or even a splash of lava from the newborn Rostov volcano. However, no modern scientific hypothesis still explains the appearance of female ghosts in the catacombs of the Kobякov settlement and the mystical demise of desperate explorers of underground galleries. One thing is clear. The ghostly mistresses of the Axai labyrinths, whether they are ghosts or reflections of the natural elements, will not tolerate human activity in their possessions. A very interesting territory, but I want to tell you a little bit more about geography so you know. So Aksai is a town and the administrative center of the Aksaisky district in the Rostov region of Russia, located on the right bank of the Don River, 18 kilometers northeast of the city of Rostov-on-Don, Rostov-na-Donu, the administrative center of that area. So that's very interesting to know, and I wanted to let you know about this. So this is where we are. Like I said, the Aksai, the construction, as far as we know, military construction, stopped in the mid-1980s. I do not know what is there now in terms of military activity. There may not be anything, but with the Ukrainian war, you just don't know anymore. With the Ukrainian-Russian war, and it's not that far, if you think about it, from Ukraine too. And some of the, again, experiments were classified. So maybe someday, maybe decades from now, we'll find out more. But that's what I wanted to let you know today. And I'll bring you more interesting information about strange events in the Russian Federation, in nearby territories, and of course paranormal phenomena of Eurasia and some other parts of the planet. If you like my research, please support me through the links you'll find in the description to this channel. Please tell others about my channel. Please like my videos, and thank you for your attention to my work.